Um, Good morning, or I should say now going into the afternoon, but I want to discuss one of the main evidentiary issues when it came to the Alexander Brothers trial. For the record, for those tuning in, trying to make all sorts of obnoxious comments, no, I do not support their behavior. Yes, I think they are largely very gross. And we can also have a separate discussion about the actual trial and what was presented at evidence. And that is, yeah, just interesting. So, anyway, something that was allowed in as some sort of manifesto, a manifesto that was indicative of their entire ethos in life, was what's called the Vent on B Word uh, blog. It was written by two of Orrin's roommates, Dylan Trussell and David Dinitz. Orrin alone, as far as it's known, did not actually write this blog. Uh, they didn't have ownership of this blog, and they, they now face this idea that they had to explain this blog, everything that was contained on this blog, as somehow being their creed in life and sustain them in life. So you have to understand, and I'm gonna be kinda graphic here, I'm gonna try to be a little less, perhaps, I'm gonna block out certain words so that I don't get flagged online. And again, I welcome comments, questions, please send them in. Feel free to please like and subscribe. We'll go through it all. But keep your, if you have a dumb comment, keep it to yourself. I really don't wanna deal with that. It's actually quite annoying. But let's go with what was actually introduced here in this blog. In 2008, Alone Alexander had a sexual partner, a consensual sexual partner. He finished on her face, so it seems in this picture, took a photo of it, sent it to Orrin. Orrin provided this photo to his roommates, who put it on the blog, and Orrin sent that link to Alone. Tons of graphic and disgusting words, images that have to do with that. But it's not illegal. Again, it was not an allegation of them doing something illegal in the sense of that act or sending that photo and having it posted. That is the only thing that came into evidence with the Alexander brothers allegedly having anything to do with this blog. So the defense argued it was highly prejudicial because it wasn't actually their blog. And I want to go through some of what is actually seen on this blog. So we see here. Grape, the highest form of flattery. I decided, save the drama for your wallet. Today, I'm going to address a problem that us nice guys have to deal with occasionally when a random dumb hoe leaves some earrings, a watch, a necklace, a bracelet, tiara, her wedding ring. What do you do? Okay, you can just see this is just, ode to Molly. Why do I love a drug that makes girls think I'm impotent? Look, there's tons of insane things on this blog. Any normal person watching this is going to be extremely disturbed. I can't even read some of this stuff. It's so gross. I mean, this is a disgusting blog. But it's important to note that this was not authored by Oren alone or Tal. It was authored by Oren's roommates. And this was what was presented in as some sort of manifesto and indicative of what they did day in, day out in life. So it's important to understand how this framed the trial, because when the government started discussing this, they were interspersing it with their alleged behaviors and then saying, look how much this matches the blog. So this alleged conspiracy, or I should say this conspiracy which was convicted, ran from 2008 until 2021. The 2008 portion of this was the blog. So I'm going to stop sharing the blog right now just because it's very graphic. But you know, as I keep going through here and seeing different posts, there's no way that you would see this blog and think that anybody who features this blog, writes this blog, is a nice person. It's completely misogynistic, disgusting, absolutely gross. That said, the Alexander brothers did not write this blog. And as Deanna Paul, defense attorney for Tal Alexander, said, there's no evidence that Tal ever knew about this blog, because there was the photo that Alon took, sent it to Oren. Oren sent it to his roommates, and they put it on the blog. And then Oren sent the blog post to Alon. So that's the extent of the evidence that was put forth in trial about their connection to this blog. How did that become the manifesto of their life? And from an evidentiary perspective, how does that work? If Tal is part of a conspiracy and this is their creed, this is what they do, it's a fair question to ask, how is he connected to this blog? That wasn't shown in court, other than his alleged behaviors with his brothers align with some of the writings of the blog. But, you know, when you read the New York Post and you read everything else, you're not going to see that the connection. It says prosecutors, this is quoting from the Post coverage, prosecutors argued the real estate twins penned some of the posts and the blog was proof of their mindset that encouraged drugging and R-wording women. Some of the most disturbing posts reference that, quote unquote, it's not R-word if she doesn't remember and if she secretly wants it. But there's nothing about the Alexander brothers' involvement in the blog itself that would indicate that this blog had anything to do with them. I know the people that are looking to pile on and say, how dare you even bring this issue up? Please feel free to just tune out, because it's not what the discussion is about. This discussion is simply about this blog and how it had an impact on the jury. It'd be interesting to see what the jury says when you actually consider the implication of what was implied from this blog. The implication from this blog was that this was their life creed. This was very clearly their game plan and very clearly their manifesto. They did not own this blog. They're only connected to one of the posts. And there's a lot of stuff that if you believe that the authors of the blog are co-conspirators, what were they doing as co-conspirators? Again, it was owned and published by Dylan Trussell, who has appeared in other places in the trial, at least his name. But that's very different than saying top to bottom automatically, this is the Alexander Brothers blog. There's no way that anyone who's actually evaluated the evidence, this is their, it is not their blog. They did not own this blog. They did not run the blog. The blog itself, it says this site is written by a collective of 10 of the gnarliest guys you've ever seen from both coasts. It is intended to provide advice to men on dealing with women and advice to women on when to shut the F up. Again, not a nice thing. I'll add that when I first visited this blog, when it appeared in the transcript, there was something like 360 visits all time since 2008. It's now at 425. But it's just important to note that as a manifesto and as something that is alleged to have been their driving creed in life, you would think that people would have seen it, known about it, and it would have been talked about. So I wanted to provide this color. Any thoughts, questions, please like, subscribe, send it around. But I wanted to provide this color so people could just see what was actually being discussed, not just what you read in the paper. I think that there's a big distinction there. It's important to note what actually is was going on. So yeah, I just wanted to put that out there about the blog that was not their blog and was considered their life manifesto. So again, that's an evidentiary question that has to do with what the jury was able to see and what they were not able to see. As I discussed yesterday, they could see this blog, but they cannot hear the fact that Alon's ex-girlfriend lived with him while they were dating. That's an evidentiary question. You can have a question about due process, what's going on in terms of what the jury is allowed to see and what they're allowed to think. Very separate discussion. I think that the blog being included is it was a pivotal point in the case. And it's important that there is a record and people actually understand what the blog is, what it's not. And it's in that spirit that I wanted to come and have this discussion. So any thoughts, questions?